Let's take a look at the top 5 highest defensive player grades according to PFF in the West Virginia victory over Oklahoma in Game 10 of the 2022 West Virginia football season. Let's go. What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Jordan Cruz back here with the Country Webcast. And before I get into this video, I just want to give you a couple quick reminders. If you would, do us a favor, hit that like button if you haven't. That helps this video's performance and will help future videos performances here on the channel. Speaking of the channel, be sure and subscribe to it if you haven't already. Helps us, helps you, helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. And if you really want to help us here at the Country Roads Webcast, one of the best ways to do that is by visiting our merch store, which is linked in the video description down below. Get you a Country Roads Webcast shirt, hoodie, beanie, you name it, you can find it with the CRW logo on it there. And we really appreciate your support as we continue to try and grow the Country Roads Webcast community throughout Mountaineer Nation. Having said that, let's get into it. All right. So the much maligned West Virginia defense for the majority of this season, and rightfully so, especially for the earlier part of the season, I think. But the one thing we can say, and I do believe we all should need to be talking about more. I know there's a lot of news going around Mountaineer Nation, a lot of different things to talk about now that are probably more pertinent. But this defense has improved in recent weeks, surprisingly, especially with the injuries that have piled up. We've seen them put together some of their best performances in the past 2 to 3 weeks, specifically, what they did against TCU. And now this week against what had been an explosive Oklahoma offense. Say what you want about the weather maybe affecting the game as well. But nonetheless, the West Virginia defense actually holds the Oklahoma offense to 18 points as Oklahoma scores 20 points, but two of those coming on a special teams blunder that ended up with a 2 point conversion on the run back of a mishandled field goal snap for Oklahoma, mishandled extra point snap that gave them the other two. So the West Virginia defense held them to 18 points and some of their lowest totals of the season. I know the Mountaineer run defense struggled a little bit, but Eric Gray, I think, is a really talented player. So the one thing that you could say negatively lately has been the rushing defense, and hopefully they do a better job of that, especially with Kansas State coming up on the schedule next week. But I think what you can say about this performance against Oklahoma, surprisingly, that you probably didn't expect to say going into this game, and of course, if you said this going into the season, but West Virginia defense just had their best performance of the season against Oklahoma and was a big reason why the West Virginia Mountaineers were able to beat the Sooners. So let's look at some of the top 5 highest graded defensive players according to PFF in that victory that really helped lead the Mountaineers to that win. And starting at number 5 right here, here's a guy that definitely deserves some credit, in my opinion, for the improvement West Virginia's had in recent weeks. And I think his play and the way he has stepped up doesn't need to go unnoticed. And that's cornerback Malachi Ruffin, who comes out with a 67.3 defensive grade for the Mountaineers in this game against Oklahoma. He played the most snaps of anyone at cornerback, surprisingly, for the Mountaineers in this game. I believe it was 68 snaps. Check out our snap counts video to find out exactly how many and to hear a little bit more analysis on that if you haven't already. But the one thing that I will say that I did say there that I will repeat here, rather, is that Malachi Ruffin, here's a guy that came to West Virginia as a walk-on, has played extensively this season, probably more than they had planned on relying on a former walk-on, especially considering the fact that they actually had moved Malachi Ruffin to safety at the beginning of the season to help provide some depth there. The injuries at cornerback have really piled up. He's had to really step in there at cornerback, even start at times. And then look at this game against Oklahoma, playing, not only contributing there at the cornerback position when they needed him fill in, but has really raised his level of play and has improved a lot since the first time we had to see him out there at cornerback earlier in the season when he really struggled. Now he, I think, is one of the stronger points of that Mountaineer secondary in recent weeks, you could even say, which is high praise for a guy that was a former walk-on. And I think holding his own is one thing, playing the most snaps at corner on the defense and coming out as the 5th highest graded player with a 67.3 grade on that defense is an entirely other thing that he has really stepped his game up. So shout out to him for that, coming out as the 5th highest graded Mountaineer this week. And then we'll stay in the defensive backfield for the 4th highest grade Mountaineer this week, and that is Hershey McLaurin coming out with a 70.3 grade for the Mountaineers defensively. And Hershey McLaurin's a guy that came to the Mountaineers from the JUCO ranks, didn't get involved right away as much as I think we thought, but he's really started to contribute more and more as the season has progressed. And to me, your two best safeties, I think, when you're talking about the true back safeties, not talking about the spear that West Virginia lists as a safety, which is kind of more of a nickel cornerback position. But the two guys that play in the backfield extensively, in the deep end are the free safety and the cat safety in this defense. And Hershey McLaurin's been playing the free safety, but the only downside is he's been splitting time with Aubrey Burks, who I think is West Virginia's best safety on the team. So I think potentially in moving forward, I wouldn't be surprised if Marcus Floyd, I believe he may have 1 year of eligibility left remaining. I'm not sure if he does or not. He may move on. But if he does indeed move on, I think maybe the best course of action, if both Hershey McLaurin and Aubrey Burke stay for West Virginia, we'll see what happens with the program moving forward, is to have one of those two guys move to cat safety, because I think having both those guys on the field would be awesome, because I really like what I've seen from both of them at times. And Hershey McLaurin in this game obviously really graded out well to come out as the fourth highest graded Mountaineer with a 70.3 overall grade in the victory over Oklahoma. So really excited to see that. And then defensive line, of course, been a mainstay on our top 5 highest player grades video series this season. And a couple of those mainstays are here yet again. And here's one of them, the Mountaineers nose tackle that's really been a force all season, the unsung hero of the defense. Maybe even you could say that, West Virginia thought the defense would take a step back after losing Mesidor. The defense has taken a step back, but it's been nothing to do with the loss of Akeem Mesidor. Jordan Jefferson has filled in that spot and not missed a beat. He's been here on the top player grades almost every week, and he's been standing out, even to the naked eye, making plays in the opposing opponent's backfield. And not even when he's not the one making the play, he's a lot of the times forcing the action into the backfield and opening up so other guys can get to play, him along with another one that we'll talk about momentarily. But can't say enough about Jordan Jefferson's performance for the Mountaineers this season, how he stepped up, the potential that he has moving forward. And then, of course, in this game against Oklahoma, to come out as the third highest graded Mountaineer with 70.9 grade. And then how about his running mate there in the same position group, Dante Stills, most games ever played in Mountaineer football history, career tackles for a loss leader, most tackles for a loss ever in a career in West Virginia football history. The stats and the superlatives keep adding up for Dante Stills this season, in his final season as a Mountaineer. And yet again, he keeps popping up as one of the highest graded Mountaineers on defense. He's been here almost every week. I can't hardly think of a week that he hasn't been here, even when he hasn't popped out on the stat sheet. And you see it again this week. If you look at the stat sheet, Sean Martin is the one that racked up 2 sacks, but look here at the player grades, and here's a reason why. Maybe he did get both of those sacks when you see Jordan Jefferson on here. And of course, you see Dante Stills on here having a great final year as a Mountaineer despite the WVU record. And I think he's probably improved his draft stock, especially when you, according to these PFF grades, every week and how he's turned out. And he comes out as the second highest graded Mountaineer with a 75.2 grade in the win over Oklahoma. And the top highest graded Mountaineer on defense, fittingly enough, was also the Mountaineers' leading tackler in the game. And I thought was the guy that was all over the field. Kept seeing him pop up around the ball. I think he finished with 12 total tackles. I believe 9 of them were solo, if I'm not mistaken. But that is Jasir Cox, the transfer from North Dakota State the Mountaineers brought in from the FCS ranks, who's really been a bright spot at times this season. And in this game, indeed, he was that, nearly reaching the 80s in his grade with a 79.6 grade to come out as the highest graded Mountaineer on defense in the win over Oklahoma. One thing I've said about this defense, injury riddled, all season. It started in the first game against Pitt and really hasn't stopped. You're getting players back and then they go back down, just things like that. And they've really had to move the pieces around to try and have success on this defense. We've seen linebackers move to, more safety spots. We've seen guys that typically play the back, move over the field side. Seen all kinds of experimentation. And Jasir Cox is a guy that's kind of really been involved with that as well. He came to West Virginia as a linebacker at he was a linebacker at North Dakota State, rather, excuse me. Came to West Virginia as that, has kind of transitioned into more of a linebacker role here throughout the latter part of the season. West Virginia initially wanted him to play that spear position, which is kind of funny because they brought him in and kind of wanted him to play the spear. Ends up that Lance Dixon, who they brought in as a linebacker and intended to play well linebacker, now they've moved him to that spear spot, which is listed as a safety in West Virginia's defense, but it's kind of more of a nickel corner almost at times. But they also can play in the box as well. And Jasir Cox, who had been playing that spear, has kind of moved over to that will linebacker spot there, but he's kind of playing all over. We've seen him even in the back end as well. and they're just finding ways to get him on the field and to get some of these interesting pieces that West Virginia has on the field, because they do have guys like that, as we're seeing Lance Dixon now playing the spear. Exree Lowe, a guy that played the most snaps in the linebacking core in this defense this year. We know he's a senior this year and has been a linebacker for a while, but when he came to West Virginia, he was a safety as well in his recruiting class. And then Jasir Cox, you got a guy that can play both. So West Virginia can really move the pieces around, I think, with some of these guys. And Jasir Cox, being able to be all over the field really made him seem like a force in this game against Oklahoma, and was a big reason West Virginia was able to hold that Oklahoma offense to one of their worst performances of the season, save for, maybe the game against Texas when they were shut out. But the West Virginia defense, I think, has stepped up in the past, couple of weeks, and particularly in this game against Oklahoma, as West Virginia was able to secure their first Big 12 win over the Sooners. And Jasir Cox was a big reason that the defense had the day that it did, leading the Mountaineers in tackles and showing that he graded out highly, as well as he comes out as the highest graded Mountaineer on defense with the 79.6 grade in that victory over Oklahoma. And that will pretty much do it for the top 5 highest graded defensive players for the Mountaineers in the win over Oklahoma. Be sure and check out the offensive player grade video if you haven't already, and the snap counts video, of course, if you haven't done that as well, as part of our series we do following every Mountaineer game. A couple more throughout the season, so we'll be back with defensive player grades again next week following the Kansas State game. Be on the lookout for that. And of course, all the West Virginia sports content releasing on the Country Roads Webcast channel. In the meantime, we'll have basketball content. I know there's a basketball game coming up on Tuesday. We'll have a post-game show for that. Gonna have podcast episode for that. Got the Oklahoma reaction podcast episode out. Gonna have the Kansas State preview pod releasing within the next couple of days. So plenty of Mountaineer sports content. Only one way to find it, right here on the Country Roads Webcast YouTube. So subscribe to us if you haven't already. Helps us, helps you, helps get that Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. And if you haven't already, before you head out and exit this video, do us a favor, hit that like button, give us that thumbs up. That'll really help this video's performance and help future videos performances here on the channel. And that really helps us as we continue to try and grow the Country Roads Webcast community throughout Mountaineer Nation. Having said that, as always, I'm Jordan Cruz. And until next time, let's go Mountaineers.